Well, there's a new play on in Adelaide. It's called Tales of Kabali, and that word might resonate with you, and if it does, you'll know that it's about the legendary South Australian writer and self-taught anthropologist Daisy Bates, who was famous for the life she led with Aborigines. She was also the wife of Breaker Morant, by the way. It stars Robina Beard as Daisy, and Robina's name might not ring a bell straight away, but I bet her voice does.
Oh, Madge, what a day at the office.
He'd better fire his hands.
What can I do?
Well, everything. And use Palmolive liquid. It's mild on hands while you do dishes. You're soaking in it.
Yes, her voice haunts you, doesn't it? It's Robina Beard as Madge spruiking Palmolive dishwashing liquid. You're soaking in it on our TVs for years, it seems. That was back in the 70s and 80s. Well, Robina's now playing Daisy Bates, the woman who lived alongside the Aborigines who'd gathered at Aldea in South Australia. The play is actually set at Pyap, which is on the banks of the Yarra River, and it begins with 71-year-old Daisy, poor and living alone, and remembering her past, trawling through her photo albums and journals. And she recalls her stories of the tribes and her political vision for an Aboriginal homeland, as well as her love for the country. Tales of Kabali is playing at Adelaide's Holden Street Theatre, which is where Fiona Kroll caught up with Robina Beard and the writer and director Jeff Sykes.
My life's like a grand fiction, a blessed chameleon of moving shapes, and identity reborn under the shadow of the first great human culture. Oh, there's Rutnest, that terrible death island. No one ever came back from there alive. They died in misery, cut off from their own tribes. It's a blot in our history, I used to say. But no one believed or wanted to hear. Out of mind on that prison was out of thought for Perth society.
What kind of person was she? Have you got some sort of picture that you've made up through real-life tales, and then how do you portray that persona on stage?
She actually came to Australia twice. The second time she came was as a reporter, what we'd call investigative reporter, with a commission from the London Times. She was a witness to events that she saw, and that gradually transformed into social activism, we'd say, a social reformer, also an anthropologist and a linguist. But there was always this writerly side to her. So that went on for decades. In this piece, we have, I suppose, used her Irishness and also a lyrical, poetic sense as part of her Irishness, a love of folklore, as well as a sense of injustice in the Irish character, to really explain her motivations for living, what has appeared to Australians for a long time as a most unusual, pioneering lifestyle with tribes people and in the desert.
And of course, Daisy Bates is played by Robina Beard. Robina, what are Daisy's strengths? Do they come out more as you play her? And perhaps you can talk a bit about what you've learnt about her as you play her character.
I find her the most fascinating little woman. I'm old enough to be her now, really, and I think she's feisty. She's got a great deal of anger. She loves the country. She really loves the people. And as far as I like to portray, she understands the Aboriginal relationship with the land and the people and the animals and the trees. She understands it, and she can't tell the white people. She lived there for so long that she absorbed it, and it's part of her psyche. It's part of her religion almost.
How much of her Irish background comes out in this kind of character?
If it comes out, it's implied, and I think it's the missing link in many biographies or studies of Daisy Bates that she was Irish. The records of her said she had a lilting voice and she told stories. So that's one thing. She also had that real stubbornness, feistiness in her activism. So a mixture of the lyrical and the injustice, and I think this piece has attributed that in part to her character and also her national character, and the compatibility of that with our Indigenous peoples, which sort of something melded there.
After leaving Ireland as an orphan and arriving in Australia in the late 1880s, Daisy Bates went to live in outback South Australia with Aboriginal tribes, and in particular Aldea, near the Nullarbor Plain. You know, what a contrast to her life in Ireland. I love that story that she actually lied too about her age so that she could come over on the boat just for a £1 passenger, because any Catholic girl between the age of 15 and 21 went as £1 rather than £40. And she must have witnessed such a clash of cultures. Does that come out in her writings or the fragments of writings that you've found, Jeff?
There's 2 points you've made about her first immigration to Australia and early marriages and who she was. There's still question marks about who she was before she came here. But look, the clash of civilisations, is that the phrase you used? The clash of cultures. I think Aldea is underplayed. What happened there when it was an Aboriginal tribal ground meeting place for tribes, and because of the soak, it was also the place of the watering stopover for the trains. I mean, it wasn't a site of armed resistance between the cultures, but on a national scale, it's a very important site of clash of civilisations and cultures, because within 10 years, the ancient soak, the underground soak, the meeting place had been destroyed by the railway. And virtually all the tribes who came there for traditional reasons never went back. So she was the witness, and to some small extent a social agent of help, but particularly a witness to this very important place of, I call it a clash of civilisations in Australian history.
Jeff, how important was Daisy Bates in adding to the identity of South Australia and maybe even the overall picture of Australian history? Did she have a huge impact there?
Yeah, she did. There's something externally, the picture of a solitary woman, and by the way, because she was a woman, the government would never give her an official status. They would have if she was a man. So it's one of the tragedies of her life. They would have given her an official role. So she's seen as a bit more eccentric than she was, but the photographs of the solitary woman living amongst tribes was etched onto our national consciousness, just the photograph. I don't think she had as much luck in advocacy or charity work or whatever that she wanted. I think it was etched in a generation of the 50s, the 60s and the 70s onto our national consciousness, yes, as being, you know, a mediator between cultures, and I think it strung a guilt cord in people that we all should be somehow. This is a representative of what we all should be in some way.
You say that she cared, you both say that, and it comes out reading about Daisy Bates that she did. I mean, she cared so much that she sold her properties and used her own money to look after the Aborigines. One thing that does stagger me, though, reading a bit about her, and maybe you can shed some light on this, is her whole attitude towards the half-caste. I mean, she had no time for the half-caste.
No, this is quite clear to me. From her experience at that time, and it's not now, we're talking about the 40s and the 30s, she found that the half-caste children were not wanted by either society at the time. You know, and now that's changed since, of course. That was her experience. She's talking about a real clash of cultures. And I don't think she saw Aboriginal people. She could not have envisaged what's happened, that they've endured. They're living in urban societies. You know, there's all sorts of hybrid relationships between the cultures. She didn't know that. I think she was genuinely, from her experience, worried by children who were the results of casual and passing sexual relationships. That's what happened, you know, between railway workers and tribal women. She felt it was sexual exploitation of the tribal women. That's what she thought, and she was protecting them.
Well, she was also really worried that the Aboriginal race was going to die out, and I guess that's why she was so maniacally writing down about their culture, recording their languages. Now, Robina, could you perhaps take us into the character of Daisy?
That bit in the play, OK? I think that it indicates that she totally understood the relationship that the Aboriginal people have with the land. What magic is there that transforms an empty landscape into a forum for intense, eternal significance? What imagination dares to enhance itself on the wall of a cliff face? Who are these almost dying people who dare to count the land along with its infinity of beings, in their universal favour. Well, my life's a puzzle, that's for sure. Lord help any poor soul who wanted to hitch a ride. Poor Breaker. We were too well suited. Both of us agin the king and fighting the government and each other in turn.
I have this thesis. Privilege of writing plays is you can sort of read between lines. I think Breaker was lovesick, you know, for this woman who abandoned him, actually.
Well,
And
she kicked him out because he didn't pay for the wedding. I wouldn't keep him.
he wouldn't be the first Australian to go overseas for that reason and have a lot of unfulfilled feelings. But I think that story's yet to be told. I think there's enough quirkiness there, but as you said, there was no fame. There was a lot of miserable life conditions. Why did she do it? So I think this little revised piece of this is a revised version, it's more character study, and I think it is an attempt to probe the character as well as the themes and issues in her life. A play can't be a documentary or a biography. You don't just do it to tell history. So obviously in redoing the character of someone who died 50 years ago, who's not as well known as she was, you're seeing resonances about, I suppose we'd call them reconciliation, resonances of how we connect to the land and how we interculturally form our emerging Australian identity. So there has to be something relevant in what she said or how we're depicting what she said with, you know, our contemporary life. And I think there is. The questions of clash of cultures are still with us, and the question of how we connect and value our continent and its ancient past are still with us. I think Bates is interesting today because I think she probed the Dreamtime and she just continually inquired about the roots of culture on this continent. And all Australian school children still need to be told that we should honour and be proud of living on a continent where the birth of human culture occurred 60,000 years ago. The language, society, religion, it all happened here on our doorstep. And if there's no other reason for honouring, if there's no other basis for reconciliation, there are many reasons for reconciliation, but that's the foundation of it. I think Bates, as a pioneering anthropologist, is on that wavelength.
Yes, indeed, and we've got to stop saying this is a new country. It's a very old country. Fiona Kroll speaking there with writer and director Jeff Sykes and actor Robina Beard, and she plays Daisy Bates. The show is called Tales of Kabali, and you can see it at the Holden Street Theatre in Adelaide. It runs until this Sunday, which is December the 2nd.